Shall we pray? O Holy One, we call upon your name, Yahweh Elohim Shaddai, Yeshua Mashiach, Adonai, El Elyon, Most High. We praise and we bless your name, and we give all thanks to you. And we invoke now, we invite your Holy Shekinah, Queen of Shabbat, to rest upon us. We invite your Holy Spirit to move within and through us. With your Spirit, illuminate our minds. Fill our hearts with your love. And set our bellies on fire with a passionate desire for a return to you. O Holy One, may we be gathered in. And so may we walk in beauty and holiness to be a sign of spiritual hope before the people in good times and bad. May we carry out your blessings. May we carry your peace. May we carry your light and truth. Holy One, this day we hold in our hearts those in sorrow and suffering and aimless wandering, praying that all might be healed, that all might be delivered, that remembrance of you might spark, that many might seek you this day. May your peace be upon this earth. May your peace be upon all. May your light be an extension. Amen.
Amen.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Good to see each and every one of you.
Good to see you.
So, Elder Sarah, you had a passage that stuck out to you.
Indeed. It is a passage in the first Samuel, in the story of David. And it speaks, "If anyone should rise up to pursue you and to seek your life, the life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living under the care of the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he shall sling out as from the hollow of a sling." So this verse actually raised a contemplation upon coming across it, that first asked this mystery of bundle of life and versus this hollow of the sling. And where this really took me was perhaps we can speak an idea that as we move through life here, there are qualities, natures within ourselves that are innate to the soul within us. And that really we're working to draw on these, to bring these more and more forward, to that illumination might come with these, that we become more and more who we truly are. And then there's things that through life we gather in from the outside that are just kind of taken up and really are false to who we are. And was wondering if we might be able to speak of this mystery of this bundle of life as that which is being gathered in, honored, uplifted, integrated, and that which in fact we do need to shed. This has been a stir this week.
So, this is a dialogue about actualizing, realizing our intelligence and our heavenly soul, and about a unification of our vital soul, our intelligence with heavenly soul or neshama, versus what isn't connected and isn't gathered in, so to speak. First, we can say that the bundle of life would have a correspondence with being or understanding on the tree of life. And that the hollow sling would have a correspondence with Malchut on the tree of life. We can also say that the bundle of life and the hollow sling all get brought down into Malchut as a simple question of how we live this life. What do I do with this life? This is of course, a season we always have a tendency to look into mysteries of dying and death.
Yes.
Just last Shabbat we were talking about impermanence. And coming into Shabbat today, I couldn't help but contemplate the virtue of the knowledge of death, the wisdom of death. In this sense, if I have understanding of what death is, if I have knowledge of the afterlife, and the vast range of possibilities in the afterlife, from heavens to hells to all kinds of realities in between, all the radiant display of my own energy, my own mind, consciousness, soul. Perhaps now I may understand how precious life is. Perhaps now I may have passion for life with knowledge of death. And perhaps more so, passion for a return to God, passion for enlightenment, passion for a full reintegration with the light continuum. So this knowledge of death can be a guidance to my soul. This knowledge of death can bring me passion for life. Because maybe I begin to understand what this life is about. And this life is about the realization of the soul and the embodiment of something of the Holy One. The embodiment of divinity. Now it seems to me that this question of what is gathered into a bundle of life, or the living, and what is cast out, as in the hollow of a sling, and it does mean casting out, that it's all in this. It's in this choice that we're making of how we live. Do I take the time to master my thoughts? Do I take the time to master my desire? My energy? While I have that time. Let's remember, in the afterlife, all of a sudden there isn't the body that keeps things as stable. The minute the mind changes, the entire reality display can change, as in a dream. For better or for worse. And one can get caught up in these things. Is one ingathered or living only in the surface consciousness? Does one recognize this display as a display of their own energy, along with the energy of others? Or no? Hollow of a sling, that's a soul still bound up to the Gilgal. And compulsory incarnation. Actually, rather unconsciously. Bundle of life? This is one who is now able to engage a conscious incarnation or a full reintegration with the infinite. Distinction? What do I live? How am I living?
The image comes up in bundle as self-contained, perhaps an image of a focus that actually continuously remembers this practice of mastering mind and desires, and versus hollow of a sling, I'm getting an image almost like a ping pong, or like a, what's it called? The pinball machine that shoots the
hand
ball.
gave it away.
Yes, that one.
I'd recognize that gesture.
That shoots the ball all over constantly. And this being really a mind that is not very focused, and surface consciousness, and the bounce all over the place.
Absolutely. I think, our ways to be gathered in and seeking to have uplifted consciousness, uplifted energy. Not to be so identified with the surface consciousness. Because we all know when we look into the surface consciousness, welcome to the great inane.
Yeah.
Of idle chatter. And sometimes like a bunch of little piranhas about things around us with judgments, of how everybody looks or how they drive or how this is. And it's all meaningless chatter. Well, so we're all acquainted. Oh, here's hollow of a sling for sure, right? What's there to be kept in it? And who wants to be in that in the afterlife? And by the way, that's possible. If that is the thrust of our reality day to day, and the majority of the time. Oh my. So we have every reason for self-restraint and self-discipline and gathering ourselves in, uplifting our energy and our thoughts. And when we're catching that kind of chatter, hey, turn to the Lord in prayer. Or take the time to contemplate a mystery or the Sephiroth, or at least shift the tide of the chatter towards something positive and seeing the good rather than the weird picking away that can happen in that idle chatter as our energy kind of spirals downward instead of upward. In other words, a conscious response and not just leaving it. It's really that passion, this passionate yearning for a greater and greater expansion of consciousness, a greater knowledge, understanding, and illumination, a greater love, a greater nearness, a greater communion with the Holy One and others. And if we can drive with this, here is the wisdom of death and why we want knowledge of death in the afterlife. Because it tells us about the purpose of living now and reminds us here is the place we make change. Here is the place of realization, not the afterlife. If in the afterlife, it's because we've labored for it here, in this life, and embody something of it in this life, you see.
I'm hearing you point to the mystery of body itself, that body here in this physical incarnation gives us an anchor to practice this, because you just spoke, without a body there's no anchor, there's nothing pulling back.
Well, yeah, this keeps bringing us back to a certain life, a certain person, a certain reality. No matter how far we float off in a daydream, this body is going to bring us back into this life and incarnation. Also, things change slowly here. Now, that can be a source of consternation at times, surely so. But it is a great virtue, because it means I have time to think about what I'm doing before the full manifestation of the consequence. Before I fully go there, I have time to think, to consider what I'm doing, generally speaking. This is very different than, say, dream. Consider a dream for a moment, because dream is 1/60th the power of death, or the afterlife according to the Zohar. Okay, now in a dream, if mood shifts, if emotion shifts, suddenly in thought, there goes the entire dream. Now, That could go from shadowy to very luminous if all of a sudden there were an uplifting in the dream, which happens. It also happens the other way, where actually it's kind of a pretty good dream, and then some sort of fear or strange desire or emotion comes up, and go, wow, all of a sudden it's not so bright. All of a sudden it's shadowy, it's scary, reality. And it happens that quick. And that's beyond the body, you see. It's like one literally is there in an instant the minute there's a different mind moment of thought and emotion. Whereas here, we have something that keeps bringing us back to here, to a certain consensus reality, collective reality, this co-created reality here, which does not change so swiftly, which is more stable. You know, think of in a dream where you're in a certain kind of building, right? And the next thing you know, you're wandering in a totally different building, but it's the same building, but it's not the same building at all.
Yeah.
You know? It's, you know, kind of freaky if you really start looking into it. But here, this building's going to be this building, generally speaking, each time you walk through it. I know it can do different things in altered states of consciousness, but that's not the point. Generally speaking, it's going to be the sanctuary house, as you know, with the, you know, bricks and the fire, the stove over there, and the mother shrine here, and so on and so forth. In dream time, though, swirly. Yeah? How much in the afterlife? When there is no point of return to the life the person one was.
Yeah.
Feeling it?
Yeah.
And this is what we want to know, not for fear, actually for curiosity. Let's get interested. Let's get proactive. Let's get the point. And when we see this, here is precious. We begin to realize, wow, this is the time I have to do as much shifting of this mastery of thought, desire, where I go. Now, you know, there's nothing worse than teachings that pop off with, there is no hell, we all go to the light. Now granted, preachers that only discuss hellfire and brimstone, that's ridiculous too. Not very uplifting. But look here, if that's true, then it doesn't matter whether you cultivate love and compassion, whether you seek a return to God, you seek enlightenment, right? All good in life. And where's the preciousness of life now? Yeah, and by the way, that's not true. There are heavens, and there are hells, and there are hungry ghost realms and all kinds of realms in the afterlife. Just as many as you and I can dream up, and then some. All of us dream up, and then some. And that's not to be scary, it's an awareness of reality as it is. Just like this life. We have choices of how we go in this life. It can be easier and it can be harder. This is just reality as it is, life as life is. And it's a really great thing because it can be quite exciting.
Indeed.
We can realize our co-creative capacity and that we can make changes with God's help. Big changes. And we want to do it while we still have breath in these bodies, while we have the time, the life.
As I reflect and experience of, I'm kind of hearing a combination of movements leading to this passion. One is it feels important to consistently kindle the awareness of the value and this precious quality of life and how short. An idea that every single day we live is the only day of that day. Well, that's going to be that only day. There won't be another that day. And mixed with a passion for the mystery, I'm also feeling something that really drives is to actually be fully taken up by, this is pretty mysterious, this life. And the fact, as you've said before, that, I mean, the whole thing, that we're standing on the face of this earth, spinning, and this, just when you start really looking at it, it's quite amazing. And how do we bring that in towards a passion that yearns to learn more and more, but also, as you've said recently, not something that is looking for an answer either, but that kindles that yearning toward understanding.
Yeah, well,
and mystery.
Well, you're talking about cultivating a presence of awareness. It's like the praise and thanks of God in the morning for the renewal of creation this day, and for the restoration of our souls to our bodies this day. Just celebrating. I'm alive.
Yeah.
God is light. God is life. I am alive. I am in the Holy One. I continue to emanate. And as you say, this day is unique. It is like no other. It is precious. Even if we're under the weather, it is still precious. One is alive, and there they are, and there's going to be good in that day. It's a good day. Every day that we are alive is a good day. And yes, mystery. Here's an understanding of mystery. There is no end to spiritual mystery. It's not a cheap detective novel. Or you read 3 chapters and you pretty much can conclude where the whole thing's going and who did it. It's not like that. The mysteries, the Sephiroth are mysteries, and the Sephiroth are endless steps. They're infinities. So there is no end to the mystery. The fact is, as mortal beings, we are not going to, in the flesh, in this world, have full comprehension of any deep mystery of creation or God. It's not possible. If one does, I suppose they're an angel or some other sort of heavenly being, like an ascended Sati. But here, that's not the play. The play here is to continuously seek to draw out, realize what knowledge and understanding and wisdom we can, aware that quite naturally it is partial and incomplete. With that hope in the afterlife, in the kingdom of heaven, for a full comprehension. Because we've labored for it in this life. What do I mean? Well, St. Paul says it. Now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we shall see face to face. Now I know only in part, but then I shall know fully as I have been fully known. So you see, there's a promise of a deep knowledge, understanding, wisdom in this transition from this world beyond. And this is a possibility for us, if we will cleave, if we will live according to our faith, indeed. If we will engage this labor. And in terms of the mystery, it's celebrating the mystery, where I'm never discouraged. I will always see the greater knowledge, the greater understanding, while being aware that there will always be those dimensions that elude my understanding in this life. We can experience this if one were gifted with a conscious capacity, aliyah nisham, mystical sense of the soul, into the heavens, supreme abode, palace of Mashiach. So, very interesting. In the middle of one of these ascents, there could be this experience of spacious raising and awareness, this, whoo, man, the understanding and wisdom and knowledge. Now come back. Come back. One will be profoundly aware of this mind not even be able to think that awareness and things no. One will be acutely aware, ooh, very partial, very, well, that's sort of the truth. And that's just the way it is. It's that play of Makafin and Panini, encircling knowledge and internalized knowledge.
Yeah.
Well, we are discussing that this is a time to labor for internalized knowledge, even though, in fact, what we can express and embody here will be limited compared to the world to come. But to just say one automatically ends up, I don't know, in the 8th heaven. Not really. Everything does merge with its source, that's true. But is it gathered in? Is it an awakened union or unconscious, the hollow of a sling? And right back out in the Gilgalim and the transmigrations of the soul. That is another matter. And for an awakening, we need to co-labor with divine grace. It just doesn't happen while we just sit there and we all go back to the light. Also, going back to the light, who has the self-worth to stand in the light and the humility to merge with it? That's another matter. Oh yeah, we all go into the light, all right. What does it become to us? Is that a beautiful, welcoming embrace or something different to us? But you see, that depends on the state of our mind and heart, our consciousness. This is why we want to learn to master consciousness, our thought, our desire. And not in a religious sense, in a sense of what is good and true, which really goes beyond doctrine. This is something that must ultimately be inwardly known. And in fact, there is that dimension of us that does, if we'll go within and open to this holy Latin Spirit of God. There's a dimension of us that does know what's good and true. We really don't need a bunch of laws and statutes.
I've often wondered if, in a certain sense, we're experiencing the afterlife all of the time, but there's a veil here, and if at the moment of death, if this veil actually gets lifted, therefore we don't have the cover-up in place anymore that we've had in place. But it's the same experience in that is kind of we feel here all of the time.
Something tells me you've experienced the ride of the sending of the souls before.
This insight came through that experience.
I thought so.
Yes.
It is like that. But are we participating in something in proximity to afterlife in all of our dreams?
Yeah.
Isn't that why the rabbis say it's 1/60th the power of death? That you're getting a hint and participating in something of that reality when you sleep and dream.
Yeah.
That your soul's running and returning all the time. And as far as running and returning, that's interesting because it's really all occupies the same space at the same time. It's like the dead. They haven't gone anywhere. They're here. They're just in another dimension of here.
Yeah.
That's all. Oh, and thinking about this life and afterlife, well, if you've lived before, isn't this the afterlife then?
Yeah.
Just saying. So to make it a scary thing, that's not helpful.
Mm-mm.
But we need to make it an aware thing of, oh, I do have good reason to pay attention here. Then let's just look at here. There is so much that could be making us miserable. There can be so much that's a cause of suffering. Why not just address it? Let's bring about the shift now and enjoy life more. Relieve that suffering. I mean, there's enough natural suffering in life. We don't need the self-generated and perpetuated stuff.
Precisely, it feels like, in a sense, the suffering that we can tend to create for ourselves is that exact masking and covering up of what we already know. So take away the endless need to mask and cover up through distractions, through all of these things that actually do cause suffering, and be willing to be in it. That's very freeing.
It is. And let's be aware that all of these different kinds of realms that we can name in the afterlife, all are lived and exist here now in this life, in mentalities, and in the play of fates and fortunes. There are folks living in hell realms on earth.
Yeah.
Internally, even externally. Hungry ghosts or fish spirit realms, animal realms, Titan or Archonic realms, these God-goddess realms of complete distraction. All of these things really exist in our psychology and our mentalities here now. So it really is something that's in the moment. It's not just out there. Also, what is that whole movement of afterlife but the energy of this life? Do we want to look and see this? Well, let's look and see what today is. It's connected. We actually have insight into the afterlife right now. Perhaps we should open it up and see how it's stirring other folks.
Indeed.
Bundle of Life and Slung have been really grounded today on appreciating all the places we can perch to contemplate unfold. One of which is coming up. A Bundle of Life feels like world to come, and being slung from the hollow of a sling feels like end of days. I want to ask how that may or may not interact with what's been shared.
What if those are the two options of the end of days? Being gathered into the bundle of life or flung out in the hollow sling. So what if that's end of days? And understand, the day of our death, for us, is the end of days. So we don't have to wait for, the great world end of days. On that day, just like awakening from a dream, you awaken from a dream, where do all the dream people in the dream world go? In effect, they pass into this destruction for you.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, when you depart this world, when you die, where will this world and all its people go? For you. That would be end of days, wouldn't it? Now, what transpires in that end of days? Is this a movement of mercy or judgment? Is this a gathering in or a casting out? Is this a movement towards resting in peace or continuing in the aimless wandering? So, it's a choice moment. And of course, this beautiful passage is actually a prophecy a woman speaks, to David. Abigail. It's a really curious story because, he and his man have been very much protecting the land around this fellow, her husband. And he's a pretty mean man. He's cruel. So they've been protecting all of his land and the herds and his men for a good while. So David goes to him at a certain time, in shearing time, of sheep, wanting to see if the fellow can help them out with some food and such. And this fellow yells at his men and just curses at them, and David becomes incensed. And he has in his mind the strictest possible judgment. He is planning with his men within a day or two to go in and slay everyone. because he has defended in his mind the wicked. So he's got this judgment in his mind. Well, this woman happens to have something of the spirit of the prophets with her. This woman's a faithful woman. She can feel it all. So when she hears from servants what happened between her husband and David's men, she knows what's coming. What does she do? She has packed in the middle of the night all these donkeys with all this different food and things that David and his men need to continue their campaign. And she has the servants go before her with all this, and then she goes after, and she goes and sees David herself. And that's when she speaks this prophecy. And the Spirit of the Lord's on her, because David was taking judgment into his own hands. And while he was anointed as king and had authority to do so, he would have had blood guilt. But what she says to him is, let the Lord judge. Mm-hmm. And as it turns out, the Lord does. Not too long later, the husband falls dead. Not by David's hand. Mm-hmm. David didn't touch a hair on his head. And no one else was harmed. And in the end, David takes Abigail in and marries her as one of his wives so that she is protected throughout her life into her old age for what she had done. Stopping him from an action that would have harmed him too. So this idea of judgment and saying judgment belongs to the Lord is all part of that prophecy. Don't you know what goes around comes around? There's that which is gathered into the bundle of life, there's that which isn't, and well, so, what is death? Death is life. How have I lived? To a person of faith? Potentially a moment of great liberation, a great illumination, a return to the one. For another, could be a time of great consternation. All depends.
I enjoy can we say, in these two different expressions I heard you point to of end of days, could we say that there is either, I'm feeling an accumulation of days that actually relate to one another versus end of days where the days don't connect to one another?
Yes. And what's been generated in those days? You know, if in these days we will actually express the intelligence that is in us, the Ruach, and let that guide our life. And we will express the inner heart's desires, you know, the desires of our inner being, the Shama. Well, now we fill our days with light, with good. And now we connect them with one another. And we gather them in. Right? So when I will live a day serving the Lord, serving the intention of my heavenly soul, my inner being, and this indwelling Mashiach, this is a day lived in Mashiach. If I do otherwise, this is a day not lived in Mashiach. Heaven forbid. Not gathered in. Right?
Yeah.
And so we're actually hearing the generation of the karmic continuum, aren't we?
Yeah.
And what it is in a simpler way. Certainly so. And do I leave unfinished business or do I finish my business? This is an important one. Do I have unfinished business or do I finish my business, my mission? If unfinished, and this is what brings back at least in the sense of the hollow of the sling. There are other things that bring back from the bundle of life. Called compassion, the desire for the enlightenment of all. So there is that. But the hollow of the sling is specifically that unconscious compulsion to incarnation, where it's compulsory, where there really is little choice. It's the aimless wandering.
I heard the discourse, the notion that's really interesting is that the sling and the dynamics of the hollow of the sling and being flung, that I heard that expressed as in the moment of death as one's own kind of inability to rest in being and rest in the union, and thus are flinging ourselves into incarnation. But this is a dynamic that one sees all over. You know, it's really interesting to watch. I mean, I know with myself, for instance, like early on the path, like there's this one ceremony, like the minute the bell was ringing, I had to jet out the door because I had something to do. But this being flung and the flinging, like in a moment of energetic union being enacted, how there can be a flinging, and that distractions of the world can like literally fling us to and fro. And so this is an interesting, not only considering this larger sense of unity and how we're compelled out of that through our compulsions and this, ping-pongy, I forget the metaphor, but the machine,
Pinballing.
But this is an observable quality that as energy starts to light off, the flinging, I see it in myself, I see it in others. It's just a very observable phenomena also. So that's...
Hence whether we're ingathered or in the surface consciousness.
Yeah, interesting, yeah.
So this is happening moment to moment, hour to hour, and day to day. It's not just a at the time of death thing. Oh. But then, maybe it's also true that we are coming into being and going out of being all the time, and that's how we exist. In this regard, it's interesting that, we really, fixate on a certain manifestation of a death or destruction, that we project a lot on, and don't realize that it's all integral to exactly how we exist to begin with.
How we abide day to day, moment to moment, hour to hour.
And then it's happening all the time. And besides, all of this is in consciousness. Everything is in consciousness. Our birth, our death, our life, afterlife, dream. It's all already display of consciousness. So the same principle is transpiring all the time in impermanence, right? Where there's creation and destruction perpetually. Coming into being and going out of being perpetually. Just very, very rapidly. No wonder we can change so fast, so in such big waves, from one mind moment to another. It's like one thing came into being as another was going out of being, just that quick. It's happening so quick we just often don't notice. There's one thing when we're deeply ingathered, for example, in meditation, all of a sudden we do begin noticing, where it's not just a concept, but we actually become aware of this going out of being into being, simultaneous, constantly. But that is reality, as it is. Isn't that wild?
That's a new understanding of the mystery of crucifixion and resurrection.
It is. I can give you another understanding of crucifixion, if you like. It was in the air this week, so I'm tempted to share it. We can see if it's connected. Rabbi Kushner does something very interesting in his dialogue about delay, in his dialogue about Passover. He says that the lamb god of Egypt was slain and its blood put on the lintels of the door. as a conscious choice for the shattering of idols and the following instead of the infinite one. Now, he doesn't use those exact words, but this is basically what he says, which is brilliant. The Lamb God is slain so that we don't fall into idolatry. Now think about the crucifixion where the man, Jesus, Yeshua, needed to be slain. So we wouldn't fall into the idolatry of worshiping Jesus like a demigod, but rather would receive Mashiach and the Holy Spirit. And you read the Gospel of John in his last dialogues about needing to go away so the Holy Spirit can come, and there's many things I would wish to tell you, but you can't understand them now. Gee, if only many good Christians could understand the mystery of the gospel and the Passover. That it's this liberation time and going beyond the surface, right? No more idols. And this is understanding of crucifixion. Why is it so important? Well, how do we learn that we are to embody this? And how are we shown? Well, no, you want to have focus in your transition through dying and death into afterlife. You want to have focus in your transitions, period, throughout your life.
Is it strange to say that somehow we interpret our lives and bodies as idols?
Absolutely. Everything we project our egos on is an idol. And our ego is the chief idol. That's why the Demiurge is really just a personification of cosmic ego. Yeah, cosmic ego. It's cosmic ego. Yeah. Yeah. And all my distractions and stuff, those are idols. Yeah. It gets subtle, huh? Heck, simply my concepts can be idols that obstruct the Spirit showing me deeper dimensions of a mystery. If I cling to them, I know this. Look at my knowledge. That's an idol. That, isn't it?
Yeah.
Versus, how great is the God who gives knowledge, who illuminates, who perpetually reveals the depths of the mysteries to those who seek to know. A little different attitude. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's that passion getting back to.
Yes. And yes, it's fine to like some things here. It's just putting it in perspective. Realizing they're just things. And, well, enjoy while you have them. And share.
There was something said in the beginning, remembrance, and in these mind moments that we have, when the remembrance comes, when you're in this mind moment and not knowing how far you've been in it, the shift happens. Just that remembrance, it shifts.
So just awareness.
Yes.
Yes. So a mastery of thought, desire is all about generating the presence of awareness.
Yes.
Being mindful and alert. And why do we say mindful and alert? Well, we want to stay mindful. What's alert? That's that aspect of ourselves that taps us back on the shoulder.
Yeah.
Hey, mindfulness. Oh, yeah. That's alertness. Well, I can see the subject of dying and death certainly stokes a balmy conversation amongst people. But anyhow, perhaps enough for one day. We'll get at it a little bit deeper next Shabbat, perhaps. Or not, who knows? We might be talking about cosmic bliss and transcendence and other wondrous things. Until another time, may you be conscious of the divine presence and power that manifests before you, within and all around you, and as you, my love to you. May the peace and grace of our Adonai go with you. May you go in the spirit of Yahweh.